Welcome to another exciting Devtoberfest session. My name is Dan Robleski. I'm one of the developer advocates, and I focus on SAP Build. Today, we're going to talk about using SAP Build Apps and using it in a very sophisticated and professional manner. But before we bring out our special guest, I wanted to share some Devtoberfest announcements with you. So the first thing is that we will have dozens and dozens of Devtoberfest sessions on many, many, many different topics. And you can find out all the sessions in the events calendar. And you can find the events calendar just by searching for Devtoberfest events, or we will put a link in the chat. The next thing is that we have a contest. And if you search for Devtoberfest Contest 2024, you will come across Thomas Young's blog, and there it will tell you all about the rules and the requirements and the prizes for the contest, which is very much worth it. And in order to win the grand prize, you will have to accumulate points. And one of the main ways to accumulate points is to attend these sessions. And after you attend all the sessions from today, later on tonight, we will publish a set of questions that you can answer. And if you answer them correctly, you will get a bunch of points. So we will put a link to that in the chat. And since we're talking about points, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the annual traditional SAP crossword puzzle. It's challenging, but very doable. I've seen comments in the community where people have gotten together to complete the puzzle. So I'm happy that I've brought people together by creating this puzzle. And it will give you 1,800 points if you complete it correctly, which is halfway to level 1. I believe level 1 is 3,000. I'm not 100% sure, but it will get you quite a way. So I encourage you to do the puzzle. Now I want to introduce our special guest, Mari Hirvi. Okay, and I'm just going to say one thing that she doesn't want me to say, which is that I consider her one of, if not the biggest experts on SAP Build Apps in terms of user enablement and helping developers to use the product correctly. So I want to invite Mari to give the presentation. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks a lot, Danielle, and thanks everyone for joining our session today. We have an interesting talk today, I hope, on how to develop with SAP Build Apps like a pro. Maybe I could expand a bit on my background first and why I'm here to talk about this. So I currently work as a product owner at the SAP Build Apps development team here in Helsinki, Finland, but I also have an extensive background in developing apps for internal use and for our customers, and I've seen quite a lot of things over the years, so I hope that I can inspire you all today and share the learnings that I've gained from my years of experience working with the tool to enable all of you to feel a bit more confident in how you build out your SAP Build Apps projects. So I wanted to start with some reasoning for the session. So quite often when we start with our application projects, we really think well about the why. So what is the problem that we're trying to address with this application? What's the need for it? Why are we developing it? Then usually next comes the what. So what tools are we going to use to build it? What should the application do? What should it look like? And then quite often we just then get to building. But what I really wanted to highlight today is the how. So from my perspective, how you can really bring your SAP Build Apps projects from good to great is to focus on the how of things. So how do I create projects that don't only work well and look great, but are also structured in a way that makes sense and is sustainable for the future. So structure is really the keyword that we're looking at today. First, I just want to briefly go through like why is structure important in my opinion? Why does it matter in the context of building applications with SAP Build Apps? Then I'm going to go through some practical tips on how to apply structure to your Build Apps projects, some of the things that have worked for me and others in the past to create apps that are professional. And then finally, I'll bring it together and discuss a bit about how you can find your own no-code workflow. So why does structure matter? Why am I talking about structure here today? If you think about SAP Build Apps, even though it's a no-code tool, it's still quite freeform in the capabilities that it brings you. So a lot of the functionalities that it offers, such as the UI canvas or the logic editor, they replicate things that are also possible in pro development. They just bring them closer to people who might not be familiar with pro code, who are not coders per se, but who still want to create applications. So there's a lot of freedom in how you use these tools. And it can be very fast and easy and fun to create things. But as we all know, with great freedom comes great responsibility. So you're also responsible for how you build out the projects and how you create something that's future-proof and easy to work with also if someone else comes after you. So if you really want to become a pro, even though you're working with no-code tools, you need to cultivate a developer mindset in how you create projects in SAP Build Apps. And what's then the drawback of not paying attention to structure? It's exactly like I said, it's unmaintainability. So you can create something that's really nice. It works like a charm from the outside, but then on the inside, it can be super difficult to maintain if you create something without paying much thought into how you structure it internally. And then finally, it's a lot easier to enhance or modify the functionality of your app if you're using some known patterns, known to yourself and known to others in your organization or your team where you're building these applications in. But I'm sure all of you are interested in the practical tips. So let's move on to that part, and I will just share a quick project that I created for this. Here we go. So this is a very, very simple app on voting for an option among two options. And I'm getting a bit of a spinner on my Google Chrome right now. Let's see if I can refresh the page. Now it's loading. Just a moment. I might have to restart the share. Yeah, it seems my Chrome has crashed. Is everything else still working? Daniel, can you hear me?
Yeah, everything is fine. Is there anything we can do
Okay.
to help?
I think I just need to restart the browser.
Okay.
Let's check. All right. Here we go. Yeah, everything was working great up until this point, of course.
Yes, I'm familiar with the feeling. For anybody who remembers
Yeah,
2
the
years
demo
ago at
effect,
TechEd.
the famous demo effect. Yes.
Yes. But in the end, it all worked out. So I'm sure this will work out too.
Okay. All right. Second try. And it seems to be all good. So here's the app that I was mentioning. So it's super simple, just kind of built to illustrate some best practices that I wanted to go through here. So on the page, there's a headline and a title and 2 buttons that give the user the option to vote for one option or the other. And then there is a message strip that we'd eventually like to make visible, not always, but once the user has picked one of these options here. Let me just open the app in the preview portal so that we can check on it as we start developing it. So starting with the first practical tip for structuring your apps is related to naming of the UI components. So I'm sure anyone who's built applications using the tool is familiar with the situation where you end up with like 26 containers and you have container 26 here, and you're starting to kind of lose track on what your containers and UI elements are actually doing. So this is my first tip. While it might seem tedious, it's actually quite quick to rename things here. So we've introduced this pattern here where you can just type into the name of the component once you've selected it here. So text1 very quickly becomes text description and so on. So personally, I like to keep the type of the component available here. So for example, here we have a container that contains some buttons, and I can actually see that there's some unnecessary nesting here. So I will just go ahead and remove this one. But for example, here we have a container that houses 2 buttons. So I will just go ahead and call it container buttons. Here we have a button with the first option. Let's call it button option 1. And then we have button option 2 and so on. So if you keep doing this while you're developing, it will help you keep better track, especially here in the tree of what your project's UI consists of. So that's the first tip that I wanted to share. Then I want to talk a bit about naming from the perspective of the variables. So this project doesn't have any variables yet, but as we want to make the message here visible conditionally, we probably need to have a variable for that. So I'm going to create it here as an app variable. And here I usually like to use camel case. So that means that you have the first word starting with a small letter, and then the second word starting with a capital letter. But there are also other options, such as snake case, which would be like this. So you have the first word, underscore, and then something else. So you divide the words with the underscore. And it doesn't really matter what you pick, but I would highly recommend that you stick to one, because you're free to name your variables as you'd like. So because, for example, here, you can already see that it looks a bit untidy when you have 2 different naming conventions in the same project. And this kind of goes also for the view components. So here I also wanted to use this notation in particular, where I have the name of the component, then the dots, and then the use of what it's being used for. But yeah, as I said, these are also up to you, but I would highly recommend consistency, picking one approach and going with it to create consistent structure in the project. Then let's talk a bit about components. So here I have a message, this kind of message strip that is right now just a container with a message. But if I foresee that I would like to use this element also on another page in my app, and let's actually create that next page soon. So if I foresee that there's some element that's not any of the pre-configured elements, but it's something that I might want to use again in the project's UI, it's highly recommendable to create your own components out of these. So right now we have something called container message, and actually I could go and rename these two. So the message icon, and then there's the message text. So to be able to really efficiently reuse this component in the app wherever I want to, I'm going to, well, first give it a different name. So the name that I want to eventually the component to have. So this will be called my message strip. And then I'll select convert to new component here. This lands me in the component template editor, which is a lot similar to the UI canvas, but it's only working in the context of this exact component. So right now, if I exit this, I can see that my collection of containers, icon, and text was combined into one message strip. And if I want to reuse it, it's super simple because I can just duplicate it either on this page or on another page. And I think when you should create these components of your own, it really depends on your app. But if you have elements like form fields, or you have some kind of cards, you have anything that you want to repeat in the app in several places, it really pays off. Because if you need to make changes, you only need to make changes to one of them for the changes to then take effect into all the instances. But as we can see, we probably want to configure the text of the message strip instead of just having it here. So let's return to the template editor and add one property for it. So we have the message, title will be message. And then on the UI canvas of the component, we're going to bind that value, the component property, the internal property, to this text here. So what happens is that I have a message, and now I can deliver the message for this component from the outside and have different messages. So for example, for this component, let's just try that the one says hello and the next one says hi. And if we look at it on the preview, yeah, it changed. So now that we have the component ready, we can move towards implementing the actual logic for this. So I wanted when the user chooses apples, I wanted to announce that apples have been chosen, and then when oranges have been chosen, I wanted to announce that orange has been chosen. So I have my show message, which should actually be a true false value. So initially the message is not shown, so it will be false. And that value is going to be controlling the visibility of my message strip on this page. So I have my app variable show message, and I will bind it to the visibility of this component. It's false, so the component disappeared from view. And I think now comes the interesting part, that what if I have the message not just on this page, but there's also another page. So let's say that we have voting for fruit on one page, and then we want to do a similar logic on another page. So we have pick an animal, and on this page, you want to pick between cats or dogs.
I see you're still changing it in the properties pane.
Yeah, that's yeah, but I'm changing the label. I'm not changing the name of the component.
My fault. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But anyways, I have two pages with very similar functionality. So I have a vote, and then I have the message strip that I want to appear on either of these. And it would be actually very tempting to just create the logic for this here on the page, like show the message or like not show it. But what we can actually utilize for these kind of repeating patterns within the app, it can be these messages, it can be something like settings, anything that should take, it works in a similar way on every page of the app, and it should take effect in a similar way everywhere in the app. We can actually utilize the global canvas page. So what the global canvas is, it's page without a user interface, but it has a logic context. And the difference between global canvas and a lot of the other pages is that there is an app launched event. So whatever happens here is kind of like the context of this logic, that any logic that you create here, it exists during the whole execution of the app. If I create something here on the pages logic canvas, it will only be available when this specific page is open. So to really utilize the power of the global canvas and the global logic, we can actually create a logic for this app that gets run every time that the user makes a selection, and it will control the visibility of the message. So we're going to create a custom event to do this. So we drag from the left side a receive event node onto the logic canvas, and we're gonna select fired from trigger event as the source, and then let's name it. And for us, that will be called show message. And what we want to do whenever we want to show the message, we're going to change the value of the app variable that controls the visibility. That's the show message, and we want to put it to true because we want to display that little message strip. Then we're going to have a delay to keep it visible for a bit. Let's say something like, oh, that's too long. Let's say something like 3 seconds. And finally, we're going to set it back to false once the message is done showing. So set it to true, delay, and then finally set it back to false to hide it. And actually, because we created this now in the global canvas, it's visible and it can be accessed from anywhere in the app. So if we return to our fruit page, we can select the apples, or like we can select the button with the option, and we can trigger the custom event that exists on the global canvas to show the message. And then actually, to make it easier for our future selves or anyone looking at the app to understand, we can rename the node. So show message and maybe a specification that it's on the global canvas. Then we can do the same for the oranges. And if I just go back to the preview, right now, if I click here, message will be shown. Even though the UI element is on this page and the trigger is on this page, the logic on the global canvas takes care of the showing of the message and hiding it. So this is kind of how you can follow the principle of don't repeat yourself in Pro code. So the don't repeat yourself principle is a very well-known principle in Pro code, because there you're always trying to think about modularity and how you can bring things up to a level where you need them. So if you don't need to show the message on any other page, by all means, you can just create the logic onto the page. But I would really encourage you to think about while you're building, to think about opportunities where you can also utilize this separation. Then one more thing I wanted to say about the components, since we now have the same component on 2 pages going on here. That's one benefit of using your own components is definitely the ability to create style classes for them. So if you check any of these existing components that we have, they have a lot of styles that you can select from. So that's also possible for you to do for the components that you create yourself. And it's beneficial because you can keep control of the existing component and create different variants of it. And if you need to change something in how the component works, you're not going to have to go through all the instances of this component in your app. Rather, you can just edit the template that you created one time. So as an example of this, let's go here on the animals page. Let's go and edit the style class for the message. It goes into the component style editor, which is a bit similar to the template editor, but has a bit more context on the canvas as well. So let's say I would like to have a variant of this message here that has a green background instead. And I can just say new style and call it the success style class. And now I have this style class. After saving, I have this style class available for the component on different pages. So I can, if I would like to, I could change this one to use the success style as well, but I can also use the default. But any changes that I make to the component itself, they will be changed in both. So for example, if I were to change the icon from this to something else, it would get changed in all the different instances of this component that I'm using in the app. So that's just something to think about.
Is the component on the By Me page?
Yeah, that's true. So whenever you create something, you can find it here on the By Me page. And I can see here that I have the message strip and I have the default look and feel here. So to recap kind of these categories that I went through, to bring structure to your projects, I really encourage you to pay attention to the naming. I encourage you to pay attention to the UI building. So when is it necessary to create a component, and then finally to the scoping of the logic and to the variables. So when do you really need something that's on the app level? Create app variables and create logic on the global canvas. And then when you need something that only has to be used in the context of one page, you can use the page variables together with the page logic canvas. And in general, creating these custom events that we used here is a really powerful way to kind of piece out your logic into smaller chunks where you can kind of keep better track of what your app logic is doing. App logic is doing in different parts of the app. Then one final tip, I guess before we go to the final part of the session, is related to the versions. So we've had history for a long time, so there is a history available for you on all the different versions, like all the different saves that you've done in the app. But we've recently introduced versioning. So you can have find points of the application where you can create a version. And now I wonder if I'm still audible. Am I still audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
I think we can all hear
amazing.
you.
Yeah, my partner just came home and our dog is very excited to greet him. So
Oh,
I'm just wondering if
since,
you can hear a dog barking
yes,
in the background.
it's a good chance to say that everybody should enter Pettoberfest, but we'll talk about that later.
Nice. Okay, so outside of all of that, like what you actually do in the project, one more final tip is that the versioning feature is really nice for you to be able to keep track of what's been going on in the project. So for example, for this app, I created a initial version already previously, but I can also create, let's create another version so I can showcase how it looks. So the versions, even though you wouldn't be releasing the app necessarily, it can still be useful to create minor versions or patch versions of the projects whenever you add some significant functionality or you create a fix. So for example, for this, my release note would be something like added animals page and logic for message strip visibility. I can release it. And if I want to, I can also view it in a view only mode. So this creates like a permanent snapshot of the app at the point where you created the version. And it's really useful also in the sense that you can take a look at the older checkpoints of your app. So let's take a look at how it looked like previously. Yeah, this was like the very, very initial stage that I started building out this app in. So there's not even the fruits example here yet. And you're also able to preview these versions. So if I go from this view to the preview portal, I can select here the version that I want to preview. So let's go to the initial version of it. I can check how it looked like and what's changed. So if you ever need to make comparisons of what your app was doing in a previous iteration, it's very useful to have this available because you can also view what's going on. Well, obviously there's no logic here, but you can also view what's going on in the logic, and if something's changed, then I would say that it can be very useful to be able to compare what was going on before. So as a final point for structure, creating versions often and in meaningful points is another good way to make the projects easier to work with.
The versions is really cool, and I think I've seen it, but I didn't realize it was a really whole new feature. So my question about the versioning is, I'm assuming I can roll back based on a version. I say, okay, I don't like this version.
Yeah, there's going to be an option to create. There's no forking for the versions right now, so you cannot go back to a version and then start kind of diverge from that version and like keep developing on top of another version. The saves that were done in a previous version are still available through the history, so that's how you can roll back. But we're also working on a feature to enable saving the version as a new project in the lobby, so you can create a fresh project and then fork it from
And
there.
do I see these versions in the build page? So for example, oh, I want to build this version. Can I do that?
Yeah, that's also possible. So whenever you're creating a version, you can go to the build service and then create the build based on the version. So that's very useful, and that's kind of the, I would say, most often used use of that feature, that you create a version whenever you want to build, but you can also create them for visibility and kind of tracking on what's actually been going on in the development of your app while you've been building it.
Somebody asked about the Fiori Horizon theme and whether it's available.
Yeah, so the components that I was building with, they are Fiori compliant. So the components that we offer out of the box, they follow the Fiori design guidelines. Of course, it might be good whenever you're developing the apps to take a look at the guidelines on SAP's website. So I believe there is a new portal just launched on the web design guidelines, right? So you can find information there on how to style the application. So of course there's freedom to how you build the apps and how they look like, but if you stick with the standard components and check also yourself like how Fiori apps look like, then you'll be able to build apps that are Horizon themed.
And actually somebody, I don't know if it was at SAP or outside SAP, but they wanted to create Fiori or UI5 look and feel components. So actually you could take two of the things you just talked about. One was, making components and the Horizon theme, and it's possible to make components that resemble Fiori. So I just wanted to say that. There was one other question about, just a simple question about being able to access like RAP and just SAP APIs from Build Apps.
Yeah, maybe I could demo it quickly. I wonder.
Okay, wow. A bonus feature. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can just take a look at that shortly.
Sure.
I'll reshare the project. There we go. So anything you have configured as a BTP destination on your sub account, you'll be able to access here on the data tab. So for example, here we have, I would believe that we have quite a lot of different SAP systems available here through our destination, since this is our demo sub account. So yeah, it's possible to integrate to a lot of different OData APIs and also REST APIs through destinations. And I believe that we have quite extensive coverage on how to set that up in our documentation. You're muted if you're talking, Dan.
My fault. Sorry about that. Somebody asked a question about UI5 and supporting UI5 components. And first of all, I want to say that we have a session next Tuesday about what some of the forward-looking stuff, the advanced things that people are working on to bring to Build Apps. So for example, Gen AI stuff and also UI5. But could you give us a preview or some information about what is the effort to integrate UI5 into Build Apps?
Yeah, so we're really looking towards how to come closer to the UI5 SAP UI5 ecosystem, because right now, as you probably know, if you ask this question, the components that we use in SAP Build Apps, they're not completely one-to-one with UI5, but that's definitely a direction that we're exploring, and especially as embeddability of the applications that are created with SAP Build Apps like comes more into the limelight, that how do we offer a user experience that's exactly the same as the SAP applications that the Build apps are embedded to, and so on. It's hard to say anything concrete. We're working on it, but it's definitely a direction that we're heading.
Yes, thanks. I've heard, I mean, there's different directions here. So one could be to incorporate UI5 components within Build Apps. One is to build into UI5. One is to use some Gen AI to bridge the gap. In any event, I want to take this opportunity to push that session next week called SAP Build Apps 2049. I don't know if anybody gets the reference to Blade Runner, but that was the reference. And they're going to talk about the efforts to bring UI5 and also Gen AI into Build Apps. So I want to push that session and all our sessions. That will be next week. Do you have anything else to add, Mary?
Yeah, I could close with my final slide here. So let me just go back to the presentation. Here we go. So how do you, okay, it's visible now, right? Yeah, so I just wanted to conclude by there's a ton of different small tricks and steps that you can take in Build Apps to really up your game there. But I would say that the most important one for you is to find your individual like no code workflow. I found this definition of workflow on Google, that a workflow is a structured series of steps that take you from the beginning to the end of a process. So I would like to think about the projects that you create and the structures that you create within the project as a kind of a process that you have this workflow where you kind of end up in the same point every time. And if you follow the same patterns, if you follow the same thought models every time that you're building, it really lets you arrive at the same high quality result every time that you're building out the project. And how to really develop, I would say that it's just by doing. So keep in mind those examples that I was talking about. Just check different tutorials and just like keep building, and that's really how you get better. So pay attention when you're creating something, not just like how it works and how it looks, but also how you actually made it work behind the scenes. And if that's something that you can replicate or you feel good about, that you'd like to replicate it in another project. Then I would say that refactoring, if you end up in a situation where you feel like you created something and then you want to recreate it on another page, or you want to recreate it in the scope of the whole app, by all means, just refactor. I think the versions are a great aid for you in that sense, that even if you want to do some internal refactoring of the project, you can create a version, you can do some refactoring, and you can check whatever was there in the previous version to really make sure that everything's set up, because it's all iterative, and also switching things up is really fast in SAP Build Apps. And then I would say that if you're working in a team, this how question is also something that you want to talk about with them, and maybe even a broader group within your organization. What are your patterns and what are your standards for the Build Apps projects that you're creating, so that you can set yourself up for success and like end up in a situation where everything you create is of a certain standard, and it's also easy to collaborate and jump in to help others when you kind of know what the common patterns that you're using are. But yeah, I think that was it. I hope you were inspired by this. I hope that you feel enabled to build better projects with Build Apps, and you feel, I think it's often said about Build Apps that it's easy, but then can it really be that professional, or you can easily create something that is not so well organized. But I think that if you really pay attention to this, you'll be able to create projects that last and that are a joy to work with. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mari. It was really, really helpful. I think the message is clear that it's able to bring some sophistication to using Build Apps, and there are tools, and there are a lot of features that maybe a lot of people don't know about, but bring a lot of capabilities. I just want to remind everybody that in about an hour, there's the last session of the day for Tooling Tuesday for SAP Build, and that is a talk with an actual partner who implemented process automation on an invoice approval process with process automation. Conceptually quite simple, but yet he involved event mesh, integration flow, a CAP application, and more to create a process for invoice approval. So the partner will come, we'll be talking in about an hour. That'll be our last session for the day. And I just want to remind everybody, I'll put in the chat right now, the blog that lists all the activities for earning points for week 1. And one of those will be the tutorial for answering questions about the sessions today. So I invite you to go in tonight or tomorrow morning and answer the question so you get credit for attending the session. So thank you everybody for attending, and have a great day.